never take it. We don't wait for specs. We build it, we own it, we ship what comes next. Welcome to the Product Engineers Podcast. Wow.
Welcome to a new episode of the Product Engineers Podcast. Actually, it's the first one of 2026. And today I am with Stephan Schmidt. I hope I said your surname correctly. And Stefan is really a builder at his core. He has over 40 years of experience into tech. He got in touch with the programming thanks to video games, and that kind of inspired him to get into this career. And he got into a lot of leadership and management roles, and that's where he is nowadays. He's actually coaching CTOs and engineering leaders to be amazing. Stefan, welcome to the podcast. This 40 years has been a long time. A lot of things happen in tech. What's been your story within these 40 years? How things have changed, and what's been your experience?
So first, thanks for having me. People who watch the video can see my beard is white. My story is that you already hit the core of it. I'm kind of a creator, and I use technology to do the things I want them to do. I want to create. When I was a kid, I wanted to play the video games I had in my head. So I needed to learn programming to write these video games. That's how I got into all of this. I wrote some video games, but they didn't turn out the way I had imagined. But I was still very proud of the results. That's how I got into it. Recently, last year, I reflected a lot about that and about the last 40 years. I think it's triggered first because of age. No midlife crisis, but still triggered by age. But second, it's triggered by the AI revolution. And I looked back and thought, what we currently see in the AI revolution is something I have seen twice before. The first time was in the 1980s when I learned programming. Suddenly, in every household, a computer arrived. Like in the 1970s, people that didn't have a computer. 1980s, in every household, a computer arrived for writing stuff, learning stuff, doing stuff. And people didn't know how to use the computer. And the second time this happened was in the 1990s when I got on the internet, first with the IRC chat and news, but later with the web. People didn't know how to use it. And again, that was kind of a revolution that enabled people to create new stuff that wasn't possible before, just like with the computer. So that's what I experienced in the 40 years. I think it's these two kind of revolutions. Everyone has a computer and the internet arrives, and that's what I see today.
That's right. So you started working in tech when things looked a bit differently. From what I've been reading, leadership was all about command and control, waterfall, hierarchies, which, I mean, in some situations is the same nowadays. I would like to hear from you. What was good about it? Why did it make sense back then? And what broke eventually?
I think command structures work best in known territory. So you build stuff that doesn't change a lot, that's well known, and that might be a product, that might be a company, but if you build stuff that's in well-known territories, command structures work very, very well. There might be a moral dimension to all of that, but just from the business perspective, I think it works very well. It also in the military works very well, I think, in the way when things are structured. But a lot of militaries found out that if there is chaos in it, if there is fast changing environments, and I think that's something the military found out 100 years before business found out, that in these kind of environments, it's better to not have a command structure, but to have more autonomy in teams, more local autonomy. And I think that's what the military learned earlier, or 50 years earlier probably. Business learned too, probably with the arrival of the internet and the explosion of home computers. The market is changing so fast, customer demand is changing so fast, that command structures do not work very well in a chaotic, rapidly changing environment.
Right. So that takes us to the 90s, early 2000s, when we start to get internet and more people start to use internet. The kind of businesses that start to grow require faster, tightened feedback loops. And that's where Agile starts to grow. That's where we start to talk about ownership, autonomy, servant leadership, and how does things start to change then after from Agile.
I don't like the term servant leadership. You might get into that one. But I think when I look at the 80s, again, there was a lot of autonomy in people and how people build tools, word processors, games. There was a lot of autonomy there. I like to look at the world in drivers, like things that drive other things. It's helpful to understand the drivers behind things. A lot of the command structure in software organizations came from the growth and the need for control. So there is let's say if there's two people building Word Prefect or two people building Lotus 123, there is not a lot of need to control things because it's just two people and they also might own the company. But then more developers arrived and people thought, okay, we need bigger organizations. There was skill specialization and all of that. And then then arrived a kind of a need of control. So we got these highly bureaucratic processes in organizations in the 1990s or at the end of the 80s and 1990s because of the need for control. That reflects into command structures. Then Agile arrived because of this uncertainty, which drove local autonomy, because it was no longer a yearly release cycle. Your competitors did a lot of stuff on the internet, so you wanted a monthly or weekly release cycle. You wanted to react to what's happening in the market. And with a lot of technology changes, when I came to the internet and then later to the World Wide Web, there were gray backgrounds. All links were blue, all text was black, and all backgrounds were gray. There is not a lot of differentiation opportunities there. But then CSS was introduced, a lot of opportunities arise in design, how you could be better than your competitor just by the looks, but also by how you did things. And so that need, I think, drove Agile in the end, that we can do things in unpredictable markets with unpredictable competitors and not have 1 year release cycles like we had in the 1980s or 1990s.
What's been your experience with Agile?
Okay, a lot to unpack, sorry. I cut it short. I was during the 1990s, doing some rational unified process, which was a very thorough process, and also having very thick software engineering books in my shelf. I was and it didn't work a lot. It didn't work very well for me and for the companies I worked for. Then I got the Extreme Programming book by Kent Beck and Alistair Cockburn. I took that book and put it on the desk of my university professor and said, now we're doing extreme programming. That's a new thing. No more RUP, all this thinking, all this UML stuff. We do extreme programming. I was a huge proponent, became a Scrum Master, but this was one of the times I learned that tools don't solve problems, people do. You need to have the right mindset and the will to do stuff the right way, and then a tool is very helpful to achieve your goals. The tool by itself is not helping in any way. I think it's what a lot of companies found out during the 2000s. I was a certified Scrum Master. I helped companies introduce Scrum. But what people learned back then is that the tool does not help. It's not a tool. The tool does not drive the change. And so a lot of Agile failed for more than 10 years, perhaps. I'm not a fan of Agile anymore.
Right.
Or I'm a fan of real Agile, but I'm not of real Agile, but I'm not a fan of 95% of stuff that I see.
Yeah, I can see that. All the companies I worked, they kind of said, yeah, we are Agile, but at the end of the day, the only Agile thing we had was having sprints and poker games, while all the rest of the company was still planning long-term for 1 year. So I think that doesn't make sense. Even if you have a development team that works Agile, but it's just one part of the system, that doesn't make any difference at the end of the day. Moving to the present, we are seeing a very interesting shift. There is this rise of new roles. One of those is, for example, the product engineers. And I know you've been talking about it on LinkedIn and you're a fan of it. Do you think that could be an answer to what Agile has been failing in?
Oh, I didn't think about that yet. So I think Agile is failing mostly for company reasons. Whenever I see a 2-month long roadmap, I just say, you're not doing Agile. And if people do sprints and not iterations, they're also not doing Agile in my mind. Is product engineer a response to that? I think product engineer is a response to, again, we need more autonomy and more local decisions. The reason for that is AI speeds up product development or engineering and product development. And if I'm 5 times faster with a developer doing stuff, I need to ask the product manager 5 times more frequently about input or decisions. And that's what Amdahl's law says. In the end, the things you can't optimize will get you. The bottleneck of a product manager will become, I think there was already a bottleneck in product management for a long time now. People think that bottleneck is in engineering, but I never thought the bottleneck is in engineering. I always thought the bottleneck is in product management. And I think that case, now it becomes obvious to people that that's the case. The reaction of product engineering is the merging of some parts of product management and some parts of engineering together with AI, I think is an answer to this with more local autonomy in decisions and responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that can also help with reducing handoffs, for example. Because like when you have product manager and designers and then engineering, and they all work in their own silos, it's inevitable that you have these handoffs, and that becomes quite a bit waterfall.
Yes, there's also an article I wrote some years ago, which is called "Why We Always End Up with Waterfall." There are also some drivers why I think are at work, and that in the end drivers towards work waterfall. But I think, and it worked. It's totally, for me, it totally sabotaged. Essentially, efficiencies totally sabotaged Scrum, because people thought, as a product manager, it's not very efficient sitting next to the developers. Let's think about the sprint ahead. And then people thought, okay, it's not very efficient to talk to the designer one sprint. Let's talk to the designer one sprint ahead. I do the planning 2 sprints ahead. And you get more and more, because of the drive for efficiency, you get far away from the ideal of product managers, designers, and developers sitting together, working together at one point in time on one feature and making it in iterations the best it could be. That is kind of Agile to me. And the efficiency drive basically killed Agile, because people were working 1 sprint ahead, 2 sprints ahead, talking to business 4 sprints ahead, and all of that. With AI, this kind of waterfall-y process breaks down, because it kills the efficiency you gain through AI. So you need to kind of balance the perceived efficiency gains by waterfall. The output is worse with waterfall, but the efficiency is better. You build the wrong thing more efficient with waterfall, versus the efficiency gains from AI. And I think in this battle, AI clearly wins. AI efficiency gains kill the waterfall efficiency gains. So that's why waterfall will not make a comeback with AI. The ultra anti-waterfall is basically the product engineer.
So the first time I read about product engineers has been like, I think 5 years ago. I mean, back then it was more about being product minded, right? But in the last year, I've seen a massive increase in companies hiring product engineers,
Yes.
most of all in the startup world. And what I've been wondering is, now we have all these people in this new role who have way more autonomy, more ownership. They can work end to end on features. How does leadership changes, right? Because of course, command and control doesn't work there. I mean, you can't really ask product engineers to work like that. You coach CTOs and engineering leaders nowadays. What's the shift you're seeing in this scenario where people start to get more ownership and autonomy?
2.5 things. First, the half thing, I don't know. So I don't know.
Your
I
best
have some
guess.
opinions, two thoughts about product engineering leadership. I think what becomes more and more important and what people have not been doing enough is leadership. For me, leadership is very simple. It means I, as a leader, come to the conclusion we should go there. And then I declare we're going there. Leadership is a very active role in thinking, look, this is a goal in the future and we will go there. And then it's also partially like, I'm the leader. Trust me, build up the trust that people will follow me and get there. I think that will become much more important than the command structure and saying, do this, do this, do this, build this feature. Instead of that, the leadership part, which is grossly neglected with everyone I talk, that will become much more important for aligning several product engineers. When I look into companies, they are very weak on vision. They usually are very, very weak on strategy. They are very reactive to competition, to the market, and to all of these things. So, yeah, that I think that's where we go in the leadership part. You asked me about leadership. How will leadership change? I think leadership will come in. It's not there today, I think, and that will be necessary in the future.
Right.
The second part is a minor thing, is why have we seen this in Agile, in startups? Why have we seen product engineers in startups? I think startups are different drivers. Again, they have much heavier competition. It's a much more cutthroat experience. If you make mistakes, if you're not on the edge, if you do not use all the tools available to your success, you will run out of money. The risk appetite is much bigger. If you don't have something to lose, if your revenue is $1 million, you have a much higher risk appetite than a company that has a revenue of 1 billion. So that's why we see Agile and other stuff, and also AI usage in the right way. AI is also product engineering, first in startups, just like in Agile, and then with bigger and bigger companies. And when it reaches the traditional big companies, then you know it's over. Then you need to look for something else that's like Agile.
So I just want to go back to the leadership part. You said something interesting, that these leaders are there to provide the right context to the people they manage. That makes me think about the responsibility of a product manager. Product managers, a lot of times they are writing tickets and doing things that maybe they should not be doing. The main responsibility of product managers is to provide context. They have the biggest knowledge about the domain where the product is, the users, the business side, so they can provide the right context to everyone else in the company. Do you think something similar can happen with leadership roles? They become managers of context, but not only on the product side, but more general.
Yeah, might be. My thinking is a lot about management. In the past, a story that I usually use is people were walking over a field and it was thundering and people were afraid and didn't know what's going on. And there was always someone who said, don't worry. The reason it's thundering is because this morning the thunder god ate something bad, so it's thundering. And then people said, okay, that makes sense. Let's keep walking. And I think that's a very important job for managers too. So giving context to people outside and inside their department and to weave a story across all these phenomenon. You know, the sun goes up, the moon goes down. I don't know what's going on. I could connect them by saying, okay, the sun god is, I don't know, is tired. And so the moon goddess takes over, or the other way around. And then that gives context to people. These connecting phenomena in the and creating a story and a context from customers, from the team, from tech, from all of these stuff. I think that's an important role in general in managers, and I think that might be becoming more important.
Storytellers.
Yeah. And not for entertainment. It's also for entertainment. I always said part of my management role is to make everyone happy and entertain them. Sometimes it's like a holiday club. I need to make sure everyone is happy and everyone is moving. So, and then there's a little bit of entertainment in the storytelling, but the core for me is really connecting the dots and creating a narrative that makes sense for everyone out of these disconnected things.
Yeah. So going a bit more in details for each role in leadership. So I would say the three bigger categories could be engineering managers, CTOs, and heads of engineering or directors. I think this could summarize the three main categories. So let's say for CTOs, how things would change. Because, for example, one thing I'm seeing more and more is having CPTOs. So they not only care about the technical part, but also start to care about the product strategy at the same time. What's been your experience so far?
When I see change, I agree with you. That's what I'm seeing. My suggestion to CTOs is first, and for engineering managers, first own AI. Like when mobile and the internet arrived, there was a lot of discussion. Today, looking back, doesn't make sense, perhaps, but from the point back then, looking forward, it made a lot of sense that mobile and the internet and all of that stuff was owned by marketing and not by a tech department, because there was no tech department in the classical sense. There was an IT department, but not a tech department. And then through the changes, it became clear that managing software projects essentially is not something that marketing is good at. They're very good at other stuff. And so over time, first on the internet and then on the mobile revolution, I think stuff migrated to tech. And in this context, a lot of engineers think AI is with tech, but a lot of people outside of tech don't think so. So my first advice would be for the CTO to own AI. And the second step for me would be what you said. I suggest to CTOs they moved into a CPTO role because I think for a lot of also something looking back, the CTO in this, people who today are CTOs might think since eternal times CTO existed and CTO were the way they are and all of that stuff. But the CTO we see today in the majority of companies is vastly driven by the internet revolution and the need of the internet and the need of product organizations. It didn't exist in that way before. It had very different, there were much fewer CTOs before. And today every company seems to need one, I don't know, like Domino's or something. Every company needs a CTO today. That was not the case. And also if there was a CTO, it was usually much more technical and more IT heavy. So I think the CTO role that CTOs today think is since time eternal is going to change. And the way I see it's changing, it's more moving into more product. And perhaps I don't know, but there is a slim chance, but there's non-zero chance that the CTO role will go away completely for a lot of companies. Like if you're SpaceX, you're going to have a CTO. But if you have a website with a database, you're not going to have a CTO. So I think a lot of these will, that's how I think it will change. A lot will go away probably, and you should take on more product responsibility. And it also makes sense for the CEO to have a CPTO there instead of two people.
I'm sure not everyone knows exactly what the main responsibility of a CTO. I know that. Could you kind of give like a small explanation of that, just to give some context?
So the 2 points. First point is what people think a CTO is and what I think a CTO is. Many people think is, and what a lot of CTOs maneuver themselves into is an execution machine. So they make sure that technology builds the stuff product once in the most efficient way, time-wise and money-wise. They scale technology, the people, the setup, and the service, all of these things in a way that today the company can serve 1,000 customers and next year they can serve 1 million customers. And in a lot of companies that splits up into a CTO and a VP of engineering role where the CTO is more about the tech and the VP engineer is more about the people, very roughly. I personally think the CTO role is a little bit different. I think the CTO role, the reason for a CTO is to have technical innovation and technical thinking in the board of directors, in the top management part, because you're a CTO, which means you're an executive, and the only reason you're an executive means you're in the top management team, solving problems there. And CTO should focus on driving technical innovation, helping technical input for better, cheaper, more competitive stuff. That's how I see the CTO role. I see it more active, where a lot of people see it more reactive to making things work that others want. So I think that's might be 2 points of view what a CTO does.
Okay, clear.
The highest
And
paid techie in the company.
yeah,
A few.
I can imagine. So let's say now you are a CTO in the era of product engineers and AI. What do you look for when building teams? There is this balance that we need to find between product engineers that could be a bit more generalists and specialists. I think that there's been a lot of discussion around this in how to build tech teams now. They could be smaller, so they can be a bit more efficient. So what's been what's your take about this, and what's been your experience?
In my opinion, teams are too big. Teams have a size which is usually too big, which is again tied to what we talked in the beginning. I think command and control structures need to manage or control the output of people. I need a manager, and what I can afford is 1 manager to 5 people. The reason for the manager is my desire for control, and what I can pay for is 1 person to 5 people. Or the other way, this cheapest thing I can get away with is 5 engineers, 1 product manager. I think that determines team sizes from my experience in the past. And whenever I did this myself or took over an organization with these kind of team sizes, I usually found out that there are in every team with 5 people, there are 2 teams who want out. So there are basically 2 teams in there with 2 people each, 2 and 3, or 3 teams, 2, 2, 1. And you can see that by how people interact into the daily or in a Scrum meeting or wherever. There are 3 people discussing something and 2 people are bored, which is a clear sign you don't have a team of 5 people. If 5 people do not interact with each other, let's say, take the idea of introverts away, like that's a different dimension. But just if you look at a meeting with 5 people and only 3 discuss things, you might have 2 teams inside them. So in general, I think teams are too big. I would try to have smaller teams. That's one thing. Then you might have the challenge how, if there is a CPO, how to cut responsibility between your teams and the product manager. If there is no CPO, I would go more product heavy for the engineers and more into product engineering, and product engineering is more product. Whereas if there was a product org and there was a CPO, then my requirements for staffing that team would be lower. For efficiency reasons, I want more autonomy, so I want product engineers who can make some. So it needs to be clear, where is the line between product management and product engineering? That's something to discuss and to find out. So that's the second thing. And the third thing in teams, whatever I suggest to. No, the third thing is easy. Third thing is everyone bullish on AI. I would not hire people who are not bullish on AI. Sorry. It's certainly fine if you're not bullish on AI, and there's certainly teams for you, and it's certainly fine to be that and think that. So it's not any judgment on my part, but for me, I think you need to be bullish for AI to work in my org. That's just how I see the future. And everyone might see it differently. And the fourth thing is has been the same and stays the same for me is motivation and ownership. I want people. If you're a junior engineer, I want you to take ownership. If you're a senior engineer, I want to take ownership. If you're a product engineer, I want you to take ownership. That becomes more important by the title of the role. For me, it was always one of the prime things I looked in interviewing. Does the person take responsibility? Do they take ownership? That makes everything easier and more fun.
What do you mean with bullish on AI? So what do you envision there?
Oh, yeah. Yesterday I gave a talk, and whenever I gave a talk about AI and being bullish of AI, I get a lot of usually if I over dramatize a lot, these talks have 2 phases. First, Stefan talks about AI. Second phase is let's bash Stefan. So that's usually how it works, and I get a lot of bashing. That means I'm bullish on AI. Now I think we will move into a near future where the majority of people will not look at code in the way we currently look at code. 2 funny things happened that I became aware of this week. First, someone published as a joke or as a real thing a programming language, I think it's called nanolang or something, that's written for AI. That's not meant for the consumptions. And I think other people tried before, but that's more serious. That's not consumption for people, but that's for humans, but for AI. There was this kind of a joke, but also a mind opener for me. Someone released a library that had no code. The library consisted of a list of 100 test cases. The prompt said, read the test cases and implement that library in language X. Why should I have a TypeScript library? Should I not have a prompt and the test cases or an API description? Is not that the future of libraries? So I know that's very early stuff and it breaks and it does not scale and all of these things. But I think that's where we're heading to. Code will not become an important artifact anymore. Like, I don't care about binary. I don't know what's running binary. When I write a Go code, I don't know the machine code operations involved in running that. And I think that will move one level up. Someone on Hacker News wrote, with AI, you need to think bigger. That's the second part of being bullish. Organizations will be able to create much bigger and much stuff that you thought that's not possible for one person to build is now possible for one person to build. You can be much more ambitious in the stuff you do with AI, and it enables everyone to be more ambitious and create more things. Like, you had a scissor in your head. I don't know if it's an English thing, it's a German thing probably, but you have a scissor in your head. The ideas you have, a lot of people, the ideas they have are tied to their skills. I think people think, oh, I could not do that. That's beyond my skills or my time or something. This is what AI enables, that you can 10x the stuff you're doing and start things that you might not have started before. That's what I think AI enables, and the flourishing of people. That's how I'm bullish on AI.
Right. So interestingly, I met a few CEOs who actually own the business, and they have a very similar point of view. I think what AI did to them, because they're usually not technical people, is really empowering them to be part of the process. So, and I can see they're having so much fun. They really feel part of the building phase, because they also feel like builders. They don't want to just delegate everything. I think there was one tweet I read on X. I don't remember who wrote it, but it's a important figure. But he said exactly like this. He said, the last 10 years I've been owning businesses and I was depressed because I always had to just delegate stuff. I'm not good at managing people. I hate that. But now with AI, I can just build, and I'm part of the process. I feel that I can do that. Then, of course, there are some limitations, but I think that's one of the best things that AI brought to us. And also maybe a bit more empathy between non-technical people and engineers. Because now people that are coding or using AI, they feel the pain. They know.
Yeah.
And they are also applying the same good practices that we use. So like incremental releases, small changes, testing. So it's a good thing that happened.
Yeah, a lot of product managers I talk to are in the finding out phase that developers smoothed over a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff in the head of developers, and you write a not perfect ticket, and the not perfect ticket between the not perfect ticket in reality is a developer who fills in all the gaps and smoothes things over. And I think that was not appreciated enough by a lot of people. If you prompt the AI with your ticket or with your stuff, you suddenly find out, okay, that gap between reality and my ticket, that's what the developer filled. And the AI currently is not as good as a developer filling that gap. So I think a lot of people are in that phase. But I also think developers, and I still think I'm a developer in the end. I'm a creator. My primary tool is currently code, and will move to AI, but currently I still identify this way. I think a lot of developers will find out what journalists found out over the last 20 years. That's how I see it. Not am I right, but that's how I see it. Journalists thought they wrote because people were interested in news and facts and investigative journalism and all of that things. That's how they when listening to journalists, at least, how they saw themselves and how the role in society they saw. But then the internet arrived, and I think they found out that what people were interested in was entertainment. So people opened the newspaper each morning because they wanted to be entertained, not to be informed. It's inform, yeah, nice. But they also wanted to say something, oh, I read about a new house, and then I want to say, that looks ugly. Why is the governor building this house? Why is the major building this house? People get engaged and entertained by reading the newspaper. The fact that there was a new, I don't know, new city center or something, was not only that the news said there was a new city center, but the entertainment of there being a new city center and the getting angry or getting happy or, at last they build a new city center. I think journalists found out over 2 decades that with social media, the entertainment part of their stories, of their fact-based reporting in a local newspaper was perhaps bigger than the I want to be informed part. So they lost readership to social media. People now get that kind of entertainment that they got from the newspaper from somewhere else, and journalists are baffled. Why is this happening? Social media has the wrong news, it's fake news, it's not fact-based, or why do people even go on social media, why aren't they not reading real newspaper, stuff like the New York Times or something, or some flourish. I think the New York Times is up and the Guardian is up, but, in general. And I think that will be something that happens to developers too. They might have the wrong. When I talk to developers, they say, yeah, I'm writing code, but I do a lot of other stuff and I do this and this and this. They have some self-image, just like journalists had a self-image. But they might the journalists found out with the internet that their self-image was not how the world perceived them. And I think developers, and I still I love developers. So I'm not against developers. I'm not angry at them. But I think developers will find out with the AI wave that people valued them for different things than they valued themselves. Just like you said with the CEO who said, oh, I was always constrained because I need to tell someone what to build and I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a lot of doubting your own identity, right? So you've been doing this for all these years. You always identified yourself as a software engineer, a coder, and then now you have to change that a bit. I think for a bunch of people, it's going to be quite challenging to go through this phase.
Yeah.
Product engineers hold a new hype, and there are a lot of good reasons to hire them and to work with them. But I also wonder where this model can kind of break down. And if you think are there still any domains or any stages where maybe it's better to work with specialists and where maybe it's better not to work with product engineers?
Yeah, I think that might also, if you're SpaceX, probably you don't want product engineers, but you want engineers. And I think if you build hardcore tech, if you build a encryption device for government use, you probably also want tech-heavy people who understand cryptography. You might not want to rely on AI helping you with getting cryptography right. So I think there are domains, especially those which require hardcore tech, and it will take a long time for AI to arrive there, much later than it arrives everywhere else. So if you have a hardcore tech problem, you need to have hardcore techies and engineers. Yeah. But for a lot of people, building a web app, building a service, if you look at Uber, they have a web app that's easy. There is some challenges of scaling. But basically, I think it's easy from the outside. I have no clue, but looking from the outside of things. There is some component about scheduling, and you might hire, because I had some customers, similar problems, and encourage them to hire logistics experts who are experts in optimizing routes and then get that into software. So that's a hardcore domain problem. And that's also what Uber has probably, or had. Now it's probably all AI, but for optimizing these algorithms was a very scientific thing. And then Uber also has self-driving cars. They are into self-driving cars and might optimize car detection with LiDAR, with radar. I think that's also hardcore tech. For Uber, there is a spectrum of where would I have more product engineers, where it's product heavy, and where would I have more, I'd say proper engineers, but that's not the right term, but that's a reflex, but tech engineers for tech heavy stuff. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think you created this very interesting infographic where you explained how things went from having all these different roles to product engineers, and then how then also all the roles involved with infrastructure, they're going to evolve into a specific category called AI ops. Yeah, and I think that was an interesting point of view. So you have product engineers involved with the most user-facing things, and then you have all the infrastructure around these systems that still requires people specializing in server management, cloud, and AI as well. I think that's you need a PhD for that probably. That was a very interesting infographic. Before wrapping up, I'd like to ask you if any leaders is listening to this, what would be your advice for trying to adopt this new model of working with product engineers, and what do you think that they should do to get ownership and autonomy?
Small pitch, buy my book. It's called Amazing CTO, but it's not about CTO. It's a lot about ownership and motivation and how to accountability, all of that stuff. So buy my book. That would be my first advice. I think it's really helpful. And one trick one of my clients did, and I think that's a good one. He created a product engineering role and made the migration a promotion. He said, we're now introducing product engineering roles, and you need to be promoted to become product engineer. So he did not change the titles of all senior developers and all, making them senior product engineers, and all, and juniors became junior product engineers. No, he said it's a promotion. And you need to be able to do this, 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 and this, and then you can be promoted to a product engineer. And I think that's a very good thing to do. That might be a very painful way for your organization. Just renaming everyone is a very easy way, but the results will be, if you just rename people and roles, you will have a lot of problems with execution and implementation. Whereas the other way, you might say it's not for me, but the other way, making it a promotion, is very painful way, but the results, everyone who made it through, the implementation will be much better.
Interesting. So do they get promoted only from engineering, or they can also be promoted from design or product management?
They can only be promoted for engineering, but I think that's a result of the classical split of a product org and a tech org. Usually the tech person, the CTO, can't make decisions about the product org. We talked about that when we had a little chat before. What's not so good perhaps for developers, and developers will totally disagree, I think, the majority, but I still think that's the case. Today, it's easier to pick for an engineer to become a product engineer because of the state of AI and the state of LLMs. And you need, I also part of some AI expert chats, and I think there is a consensus there that today you need a lot of software engineering background to make AI work successfully. So there's a huge opportunity currently for developers to become product engineers. I'd say Pareto principle does not apply, but it's a good idea. 80% of product engineers will come from engineering and 20% will come from product. But that might not be the same in 5 years. When AI gets easier and you need less engineering knowledge to make it happen, today you need a lot, but you might not need a lot in 5 or 10 years. I think that will shift and you might get more promotions. People will become much easier for product managers to be promoted to the role. I think it's a tough way, but it will become easier if the product manager can do the thing and you have a proper organization set up which doesn't have a split brain problem of tech and product. Promote product managers to product engineers.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting years, I think, the next 5 to 10 years. So looking forward to see what happens. We are at the end of the episode. It's been great chatting with you. A lot of very interesting insights. And yeah, thank you very much. If people want to find you or maybe ask you any questions about the episode or anything else, where they can find you, what's your best channel?
They should Google Amazing CTO and they will find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. But I got recently a customer through AI. So you might be able to ask a Gemini or a ChatGPT about me, and then it might tell you something about me too. So that might also work. But the easiest thing is Googling Amazing CTO and then getting into contact on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank you for having me.